We are on DAF Samach Amud Aleph. Yesterday, Rabbi Wise got up to the two dots on DAF Samach Amud Aleph. Thankfully, he went a little bit ahead. But just to review just the concept of what the discussion of the Gemara was at the top of Samach Amud Aleph, the question really is, what is the main part of a ring or any utensil? Is it the maimed? Is it the base, the foundation of it, or is it the part of the kli which provides the primary utility? So, for example, a ring with a seal on it. This is a machlokes whether the ring is the main part of the ring, or whether it's the seal, the signet, the seal that's on that's on top of it. And depending upon what material it is and so forth, will determine whether it's subject to be makabel tumah and whether a person can carry with it on Shabbos. Okay, so let's go on. We had learned in the Mishnah that the woman may not walk out on Shabbos with a machat she'ena nekuva, with a needle that does not have an eye, a needle that does not have a hole. So basically it's like a pin. And we said that all of the items in our Mishnah, you're not allowed to walk out with them on Shabbos, but if you do, you're not in violation of Shabbos, because these things are considered to be a tachshit. It's just that we're concerned that they're a tachshit, but you may end up carrying them on Shabbos. You may end up taking them off and carrying them on Shabbos. So the Gemara's question now is, Lamai Chazia, what is this pin usable for? Why is it considered to be a tachshit in the first place? It should be something that you're carrying. So Amar Rav Yoseph, Hol v'isha ogeres or ogedes basara. It's because a woman uses this pin to pin or bunch up her hair. And there's a little bit of a machlokus between Rashi and Tosfos exactly how to understand this. Tosfos explains that a woman has this bonnet or this cap that she wears on her head, and a lot of times there's some extra hair that sticks out of the bonnet, and it's very hard for the bonnet to hold it all, so she needs to use a pin, sort of like a bobby pin, yeah, I guess like a bobby pin to sort of hold it together and keep it under the cap. So that's why she has this pin. So, and as a matter of fact, so that's why it's considered to be a functional pin. It's considered to be part of her accessories, part of her wardrobe. And that's why she's not liable for a malacha when she walks with it outside. So Amarle Abaya v'tihavi kibiris tahora v'tishtari. Abaya says, well, in that case, if it's considered to be a part of her necessary accessories for her hair, then it should be like a garter belt, which we say is not makabel tumah because it's not in itself an article of clothing, but it's a support for clothing. So therefore, it's not makabel tumah. We're going to see later on, the Gemara will talk about a garter belt. It's something that holds up her hosiery. And it's completely permitted to walk outside with it on Shabbos, because what? You're not concerned she's going to remove a garter belt in public. I mean, then her hose will fall off, right? So these are things that, for tznius purposes, we're not concerned she's going to remove these things publicly, so why should we be worried that she's going to carry it? It should be part of her wardrobe, and it should be completely permitted. So, Elatirgamor of Adon Arsha, Kameda Rav Yosef, but rather, this Amora says, Hol v'isha cholekes basara b'shabbos. The answer is that we're not talking about this bobby pin kind of thing, but that's holding her hair in place, but that for sure she's not going to remove in public. But we're talking about a kind of pin that is used to part her hair. It's like a one-tooth comb. It's used to part her hair. Now, v'isha cholekes basara, period. A woman uses it to part her hair. So the Gemara's then question is, well, b'Shabbos l'may chazia. Well, if that's the case, then what function does it serve on Shabbos? Because, as we'll see later on, it's problematic to part your hair on Shabbos because you may end up pulling out hair. So Chazal don't allow you to comb your hair. So if that's the case, why then is she allowed to? Why isn't she doing a malacha when she walks out with it on Shabbos? So Amarava tas shel zahav yeshla al rosha. Answers Rava that there is some ornamental function to this pin. In other words, one end of the pin is used for a comb to part her hair. The other end has some kind of gold plate ornament on the other side, and what a woman would typically do would be during the week she would use it to part her hair, and on Shabbos, even though she can't part her hair with it, she would stick it somewhere in her hair or in her bonnet, and it would dangle over her forehead as an ornament. So that's what the Mishnah is saying, is that even though it's ornamental, she can't walk out with it on Shabbos because she may remove it and end up carrying in Rishus Harabim.
They weren't afraid of sneeze, but they were afraid of combing.
The issue is not combing. The issue is that she knows she can't comb with it on Shabbos, but we're worried that she may take it off. It's an ornament. It's a tachshit. It's an ornament that she'll end up carrying it.
But it has some function.
It has a function. The function is not usable on Shabbos, but the ornamental use is usable on Shabbos. Next Mishnah. Lo yetze ha'ish b'sandal ha'misumar. This is the famous sandal ha'misumar case. It's a spiked sandal. A person cannot walk out on Shabbos with a spiked sandal. We're going to see there's a special, very specific, unique reason for this.
Like a golf shoe.
Sort of like a golf shoe, but it's a sandal instead of a shoe. That's going to make a difference as well. V'lo biyachid, nor is a person allowed to walk with one sandal or one shoe outside on Shabbos. Rashi says the reason is because we're worried that a person may become very self-conscious. People will ridicule him. Hey, look, what is he walking out with just one shoe? Where's your other shoe, man? And he may be embarrassed. He'll take off the shoe and carry it. And so therefore you can't walk out with one shoe. Bisman shein barag lomaka, provided that one foot is not injured. But if one foot is injured, then you're allowed to wear one shoe. The Gemara will clarify this further. Below b'tfilin, you're not allowed to walk outside on Shabbos with tefillin. Below b'kameya bisman she'eno min amumche, nor can you walk outside on Shabbos with an amulet that has yet been untested. Because since it's been untested, you may be tempted to remove it. But if once it's been tested to show that it wards off bad spirits, then you won't be tempted to remove it outside. Below b'siryon, below b'kasta, below b'magafayim. These are all used in, these are things that a soldier wears as he prepares to go out to battle. The Gemara will explain them, and these are things that you're not allowed to walk out with on Shabbos. We'll explain why. The imyatza eno chayiv chatas, and if you do walk outside with these on Shabbos, since they do act as either a part of your wardrobe or they act as a tafshit, you're not chayiv a malacha. You're not carrying them, but it's still aser. Now, the Gemara now says, Sandal ha-misumar my time. Why can you not wear a spiked sandal? So, Amar Shmuel, Shalufei ha-gezera hayu, v'hayu nichboin b'ma'ara. Where there was an episode in Jewish history where there were people who were hiding in a cave because of religious persecution. It was either the Romans or the Persians or some other persecutor that was trying to prevent the Jews from serving God, and they were actually even, their lives were in danger, so they went into hiding. The Amru hanichnas yikanes v'hayotze al yetze. And therefore, the Jews in the cave made a rule that if you want to come into the cave, you can come in, but you can't leave once you've come in. And the reason is because when you come into a cave, you can at least scope the area and make sure that no one's watching, no one's following you. When you want to leave the cave, you have no way of knowing who's waiting outside the cave. So they made a rule that once you're in, until we know for sure that the coast is clear, no one's allowed to leave. So Napach Sandalo Shel Echad Mehen. So the one Shlamazel, or Shlemiel, I'm not sure whether it was a Shlemiel or a Shlamazel, but either way, he made all the trouble. Because what happened was that he put on his sandals backwards. Okay? And so Kisbur and Heim Echad Mehen Yatza. And they looked at the sandal tracks in the dirt in the cave, and it had the appearance of a guy walking out of the cave because the sandal tracks were backwards, right? And so all of a sudden someone yelled, "Hey, someone just left the cave!" And it created a mass panic. V'ra'uhu oivim, and now people said, "Oh, he must have been spotted by the enemy." V'atzav boin alein, and now they're going to come and invade the cave. Dachku zeh bazeh v'hargu zeh zeh yosem imasha hargu bahem oivim. They started pushing and to try to escape the cave, and they trampled each other, and they ended up killing more than what the enemy would have killed them. So the rabbis said from that point onwards, no more spiked sandals on Shabbos. Rabbi Eloi ben Elazar Omer b'ma'ora hayu yoshvin v'shamu kol me'al gabi ha'ma'ora. Rabbi Eloi says that he has a slightly different version of the story. He says it wasn't that a guy wore his sandals backwards, but rather they were sitting in a cave and they heard a sound from above the cave, because the cave was probably underground. They heard a sound above, thinking that it was the enemy coming. And that's what caused them to trample each other in their attempt to escape. Rami Bar Yecheskel Amar Bebeis HaKnesses Hayu Yoshvim. Rami Bar Yecheskel says, and this is something that resonates more with us, they were all sitting in shul one day. V'shamu kol me'achorei Beis HaKnesses, and they heard a voice from behind the shul. It was probably someone yelling, "Hot cholent over here, come and get it." And when they heard that, Kisvur and Hayu Shaboim Aleim Oivim. So I'm just saying that facetiously, but you can mention a stampede when someone says Kiddush time, right? No, but this was not the case. What happened over here was that it was a time of religious persecution, so they were hiding in the shul, but when they heard that the enemy was coming, so they heard a sound, sounded like the enemy. They thought the enemy was coming to burn down the shul or attack them. So again, they ended up trampling and killing each other more than what the enemy would have done. So that's when they made the decree that a person may not walk out on Shabbos with a spiked sandal. So the Gemara says, well, if the concern is mass panic and a stampede, so then it should be usher even during the weekday. The Gemara answers, Ma'isa ki hava b'Shabbos hava. The answer is because the Ma'isa Shahaya was on Shabbos. So they fashioned the decree after the Ma'isa Shahaya, after the actual event. So b'Yom Tov Lishtari. So if that's the case, then it should be permitted to wear the Sandal HaMisumar, the spiked sandal, on Yom Tov, because it's not Shabbos. So Alama Tanan, why then does the Mishnah in BAYT say that B'Shalchet Kelim b'Yom Tov, Bein Tfurim, Bein Shenan Tfurim, that you're allowed to send on Yom Tov, you can send a friend a gift of some kind of utensil, whether it's stitched or unstitched, avolo sandal hamisubar velo min al sheno tafur. But you're not allowed to send a friend a spiked sandal or an unstitched shoe, because these things have no use on Yom Tov, and therefore they're considered to be muktzah. The question is, according to what you've just argued, that they only made the decree on Shabbos because of the Ma'aser Shahaya that was on Shabbos, then why in Yom Tov should the spiked sandal be forbidden and be muktzah? It should be perfectly okay to send that as a gift on Yom Tov. So the Gemara answers, B'Shabbos my time, the Ika Kinufa, B'Yom Tov Nami Ika Kinufya. The Gemara answers, I'll tell you why. The rabbis made a decree to fashion themselves after the Ma'aser Shahaya. So they said that any time that there are people who gather socially, or large gatherings of people, like on Shabbos or Yom Tov, that's when we're going to asr the spiked sandal. So it's true that it's usher not only on Shabbos but on Yom Tov as well. So the Gemara says, well, by that argument, Tainus Sibur Ika Kinufya Litzar. If that's the case, well, then on a public fast day, there's also social gathering in the Beis HaKnesses, so we should usher spiked sandals on a public fast day as well. The Gemara answers, Ma'isa ki hava b'kinufya d'isura, hacha b'kinufya dehetei rahava. So the Gemara answers that, or the kinufya hu, it's probably the more correct girsa, answers the Gemara that that the story, the historical event occurred at a time when it was a time of social gathering, when there was an Isser Malacha, when you couldn't do work. And perhaps that may have contributed to the stampede, because there was no way of maybe alerting people in a more effective fashion. So therefore, the Gemara says the rabbis, when they made their decree, only made the prohibition at a time of when there are social gatherings and you can't do malacha. But if this is a time of social gathering and you can do malacha, like on a public fast day, that was not included in the prohibition. V'afilu Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva, the Amar lo asru ela biyardenu v'asfinu v'maiser shahaya, he says, and the halacha that a spiked sandal is usher on Yom Tov, even though Yom Tov was not the historical event, it was really on a Shabbos. But even Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva would agree that the decree extends to Yom Tov as well. Now, what did Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva say? Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva was of the opinion that when the rabbis make a decree based upon a specific historical event, the decree is limited to those exact circumstances of the historical event. So, here's the case Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva addresses. the Gemara, the Chazal made a decree based upon an event that once occurred. Normally, you know that when you transport the ashes of the paraduma, you have to be very careful that you transport it in a way that the ashes will not become tummy, because once they become tummy, they're not usable anymore, and this is priceless material. So what happened once is that a person was transporting the ashes of the paraduma across the Jordan River on a boat, and when they got to shore, they discovered that there was a piece of a corpse on the bottom of the boat. So they made a decree and they said that from now on, anytime you cross a body of water, you cannot carry the ashes of the paraduma across a body of water. And they extended that decree to all bodies of water, not just the Jordan River. And they extended it not only to boats, but even when you're walking over a bridge. And Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva disagrees, and he says that no, based on this historical event, the only time that it's usher is when you're crossing specifically the Jordan River on a boat. But if you're crossing any other body of water, or if you're crossing the Jordan River on a bridge and not on a boat, then you're allowed to transport the ashes of the paraduma. So you see, he's much more specific. He says that when the rabbis make a takana based on a Ma'aser Shahaya, the takana is fashioned very carefully after the Ma'aser Shahaya. So you might argue that Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva would hold that walking out with a sandala misumar is only usher on Shabbos, not on Yom Tov.
Well, why would they transport mechatas?
Why would they?
Why would they take the ashes?
Well, because maybe they were manufactured it. Maybe they found a red cow in Syria or in Jordan, and they burned it there, and then.
Oh, you don't have to burn it by the Beis Hamikdash?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. You have to burn it by the Beis Hamikdash. So it could be maybe they needed to purify someone on the other side.
Or
of
you
the
can,
Jordan. Yeah, probably from the Beis Hamikdash.
You can use it anywhere to purify.
Yeah. Right. Right. So the Gemara's question. So that's Gemara's question. Would Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva agree that a sandala misumar is asur on Yontif as well? So the Gemara says yes, because hani mili yardein deshani nishar naharos avol Yontif v'Shabbos ki hadari ninu. He says that's only when you can cite specific differentiations that exist between the Jordan River and other bodies of water. That's where Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva is more specific over there. He says because there are landmarks that differentiate the Jordan River from other bodies of water. But Shabbos and Yom Tov conceptually are almost identical as far as their Isser Malacha. Ditznan ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos elo eichel nefesh bilvad. Because as we know that the only difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov as far as your behavior is that on Yom Tov you're allowed to do things for cooking, and on Shabbos you're not. So therefore, since they're so similar, even Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva would agree that the spiked sandal is asur on Yom Tov. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel lo shanu elo lechazek avol lenoi mutar. So he says a chiddush, and this chiddush is that the only time that a spiked sandal is usher is if the spikes are there to reinforce the sole. But if the spikes are there for ornamental purposes, so then you're allowed to wear it on Shabbos. Because why? Because then it no longer is like the original Ma'aser Shahaya. The Kamalunoi, how do you know if spikes are there for ornamental purposes? The answer is because there's a limited number of spikes. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chamesh Bazeh v'Chamesh Bazeh. Rabbi Yochanan says if you have no more than 5 spikes on each sole, so then you know it's for ornamental purposes. But Rabbi Chanina Amar Sheva Bazeh v'Sheva Bazeh. Rabbi Chanina says you can even have up to 7 on each sole. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan l'Rab Shaman Bar Abba Asper Olach L'Didi Shtayim Mikan U'Shtayim Mikan Ve'echas B'Tar Siyosa. Let me explain to you, says Rabbi Yochanan, what I mean when I say you can have 5 on each sandal. It's not that you have 5 on the sole. You have 4 on the bottom of the shoe, 1 by the toes and 1 by the heel, and then 1 on the left side and 1 on the right side of the bottom of the shoe. And then you have the 5th one on the top where the strap is. Then you know that's for ornamental purposes. And Rabbi Chanina, Gimel Mikan, the Gimel Mikan, the Echas B'Tar Siyosef. According to Rabbi Chanina, you'd have 3 vertically on the bottom and 3 horizontally, almost like making a cross, and then 1 on the top by the strap. So then you know that it's for ornamental purposes, and if it's more than that, so then you know that it's for strengthening the sole, and therefore it's problematic. So the Gemara now says, Meisve, Sandal Hanote, Oselo Sheva Divrei Rebbe Nasan, Rebbe Mater B'Yud Gimel. So there's a brisa that says that if you have a sandal where the sole is lopsided, so that one portion of the sole is thicker and one is thinner, so that when you step in them, you feel like you're about to fall over because it's lopsided. So what you want to do is you want to insert some spikes in order to balance the sole. So how many are you allowed to put in order for you to be able to wear this on Shabbos? So Rabbi Nassan says not more than 7, and Rabbi says up to 13. So Bishlam la Rabbi Chanina hu da Amar ke Rabbi Nassan la Rabbi Yochanan da Amar keman. So I can understand Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina holds like Rabbi Nassan, who says 7 spikes. But Rabbi Yochanan, who says 5 spikes, doesn't go like either Rabbi Nassan or Rabbi. Because Rabbi Nassan says 7 and Rabbi says 13.
I'm sorry, would be allowed in that case?
Yeah, you can up to that amount.
Right, but we're saying before that Lanoi is allowed. What's considered Lanoi? Here it's to fix the sandal, to balance it.
Here it's to balance it. So the Gemara's assumption is because here it's not for the reinforcement of the sole, but rather just to balance it, it's similar to ornamental. So your question is a valid question. And we're going to see the Gemara is going to make this differentiation later. But for now, the Gemara's Havamina is that there's no distinction. So the Gemara answers, Hu da Amar ke Rebbe Nahoroi. That you'd have to say that Rabbi Yochanan, who says only up to 5, goes like another Tana, which is Rabbi Nahoroi. The Tanya Rabbi Nahoroi, Omer Hei Mutter V'Sheva Asa. So he said that only up to 5 spikes is mutter, but more than that is asa. So Amar Le'ifa LaRabba Bar Bar Chana, Atun Talmidei Rabbi Yochanan Avidu Rabbi Yochanan Ananavid ke Rabbi Chanina. He said that you who are students of Rabbi Yochanan, you have to limit yourselves to not more than 5 spikes on each sandal. But we who go like Rabbi Chanina, we can go up, or we who are, I guess, are not limited to Rabbi Yochanan because we're not Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan, we can go like Rabbi Chanina to allow ourselves up to 7 on each sandal. Ba'amine Rav Huna me Rav Ashi Chamesh Mahu. So Rav Huna wanted to get clarification on the halacha, and he asked him, what's the halacha with 5? Is 5 okay? So Amar Lei Afilu Zayin Mutar. And he said to him, I hold that even 7 is mutar because we go like Rabbi Chanina. So Teshmai. So then he asked him, well, how about 9? So Amar Lei Afilu Ches Asr. He said, no, even 8 is Asr. So therefore you see that he held like Rabbi Chanina. Va'aminei Hahu Ratz Ana me Rabbi Ami. A certain shoemaker or cobbler or leathersmith asked Rabbi Ami, Tafra mibifnim mahu. What if you would take this sandal hamisumar, this sandal that has spikes, and you would make an insert into the sandal like a leather pouch for the shoe to fit in? So you see, normally a sandal is an open-toe shoe. So now you're sort of making the sandal into a closed-toe looking shoe, right? Would that now be permitted? Could such a type of shoe-sandal hybrid be permitted to wear it on Shabbos? So Amar Lei, mutter v'lo yadana my time. So he said back to him, he said to this cobbler, he said, it is permitted, but I don't know the reason. I just heard from my Rebbe that it's permitted. So Amar Le Rav Ashi v'lo yadamar my time, came the dafra mibifnim, habelei minol, b'sandal gazu b'rabbanan, b'minol lo gazu b'rabbanan. So he said to him, well, the reason should be obvious. When the rabbis made their decree, they only decreed against the sandal, but not against the shoe. Once you put in this insert, you've made the sandal into a shoe, and therefore it doesn't fit under the rubric of the takana anymore. Okay, Ba'amine Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda me Rabbi Abba Bar Avina, Aso kemin kalbos mahu. The question now is, what if the spikes that are on the bottom of the sandal are not the straight spikes, but rather they're curved spikes? And you see a little diagram on the bottom, on the side, on the left margin. They look like a crescent, sort of like a staple, a hardware staple. So what you do is you would stick one end of the curved spike into the leather sole, and then push it out so that you have the 2 ends coming out on the bottom, right? So the question is that permitted or not? So was that included in the Gezerah? So Amar Lei mutter. He said to him, it's mutter. Why? Because rabbis, when they forbade the sandal, they only forbade the straight spikes, not the curved spikes. Itmar nami Amar Rav Yossi b'Rabi Chanina asokim in kalbos mutter. This was stated also by these other Amoraim. Amar Rav Sheshes chifeu kulu b'mismars kadei shelo tehi karka ochlaso mutter. Now we have another chiddush from Rav Sheshes, that if a person completely covers the bottom part of the shoe completely with spikes, in order that, or with nails I should say, in order that the earth does not erode the leather on the bottom, so then that's okay. That no longer is similar to the original spiked shoe. So Tanya Kavase the Rav Sheshes lo yetze ha'ish b'sandal hamisumar v'lo yitayel mibayis labayis Afilu mimita lamita. That we have to, it's like a little bit of a longer brisa. The first part of the brisa says that you're not allowed to walk outside with a spike sandal, and you're not even allowed to walk in the same house with the spike sandal, even from one house to another house, or even from one bed to another bed in the same house. You can't. But what you are allowed to do is you're allowed to handle this shoe. You're allowed to pick it up and use it as a cover or as a prop for your bedpost, because it's not considered to be muksa. You just can't wear it on your foot. But Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon oser. Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says no, even to pick it up on Shabbos is aser, because he holds it's totally muksa. Nasharov mismerosa v'nishtayr bo dalet ohei mutar. If the majority of the spikes or nails fall off the sandal and all you have is 4 or 5 left, so then it's mutter. And the Rebbe matir ad sheva, Rebbe says as long as you can even have up to 7 spikes for it to be mutter. And chipehu ba'or milamata, if a person covers it with leather, making like a leather insert to make it like a shoe, or if a kavalo mismaros milamaila, or if he puts nails on it on the top of the sandal, so then it's mutter. Aso kimin kalbos, o kimin tas, o kimin yaseid. If a person made the spikes a different shape, he either made them like a kalbos, like those curved staple kind of spikes, or kimin tas, or he made them thicker at the tip, or he made them narrower than normal spikes, like a yaseh, like a peg. Or if he covers the entire bottom of the shoe with these types of nails, so that the earth should not erode the leather. So basically, because he's overpopulated the spikes, so then it's going to be okay. So hagu fakasha. So the Gemara now says, let's analyze this brisa. There's an inherent contradiction in this brisa. Amart nashurov mismerosa v'afagav dinishtayiru beituva. First, you say that as long as the majority of spikes have fallen out, the sandal is okay, which implies that as long as the majority of the spikes have fallen out, even if there's more than 4 or 5 spikes left, then it's considered to be okay on Shabbos. And then you said, no, that only if 4 or 5 are left is it permitted, but if more than 4 or 5 are left, it's still prohibited. So how do you reconcile that? Amar of Sheshas Lokasha kan shenigmemu kan shene'ekru. The answer is that it depends how the spikes were removed from the bottom of the sandal. If they broke off such that there's like a stub left of the spike, and you can tell that there used to be a spike here and now there's none, so then it's mutter as long as the majority of spikes have broken off. But if the spike was completely uprooted so that there's no remnant there's no stub of a spike left on the bottom of the shoe, so it's not as clearly indicated that there used to be spikes here. So therefore you need to have no more than 4 or 5 in order for the sandal to be permitted. So arba o chamesh mutter, so 4 or 5. That's a very unusual and a very imprecise kind of measurement. Either say 4 or say 5. So that's the Gemara's question. Hashta chamesh ari arba miboy. If you're telling me that 5 spikes are permitted, why do you have to tell me that 4 is also permitted? Amar Rav Chizda arba misandal gadol, v'chamesh misandal katan, v'chamesh misandal gadol. So Rav Chizda says the way you reconcile it is like this: 4 or 5 is talking about 2 different sandals. A small sandal can have no more than 4 spikes, and a large sandal can have no more than 5 spikes. What's a small and what's a large? I have no idea. Maybe for a child size versus an adult size, but it's not clear from the Gemara. But Rebbe Matir ad Sheva, Rebbe says you can have up until 7 spikes. So frek the Gemara Vahatanya Rebbe Matir ad Shloshesrei. But didn't Rebbe say in the brisa that we saw before in the machlokas between Reb Nassan and Rebbe that Reb Nassan said 7, and Rebbe said you could have up to 13, and here Rebbe says you can only have up to 7, like Reb Nassan. So how do you reconcile it? So the Gemara says no to shiny. This is what Shlomi was alluding to. He says no. The previous brisa was talking about where the spikes are inserted in order to balance a lopsided sole. That's where Rebbe is more liberal and says you could have up to 13 spikes. But if it's an even-keeled sole, and it's only just for it's only for ornamental purposes, so then you can have no more than 7.
Very symbolic reasons all these numbers. like 4, 5, like 7 is, I mean, Shabbos, I don't know, just figuring all these numbers.
There doesn't seem to be anything mystical here, or anything with gematrias or anything like that. I don't think so, at least. That's at least at face value. But again, we're not shoemakers, and we don't know what the conventions of shoemaking were, 2,000 years ago.
Right.
So it's very hard for us to relate to this. But if someone was wearing these kinds of shoes back, and you understood what the shoes were like, then it probably would make a lot more sense. So the Gemara now says, "Hashta da asis lahachi." Once you tell me this, that there's a difference between spikes in a shoe to compensate for the lopsidedness versus an ornamental spike. So the Rabbi Yochanan Ami lo kasha, no to shiny. So then that explains why Rabbi Yochanan had said 5, whereas the Brisa had said 7 or 13. There's no contradiction. Rabbi Yochanan was talking about ornamental spikes, and that's why he says no more than 5. And the Brisa, which says 7 or 13, is talking about where they're lopsided spikes. Amar of Masna v'Amrila Amar of Achdabuye bar Masna Amar of Masna Ein halacha Rabbi Elazar b'Rebbi Shimon. He says the halacha is not like Rabbi Elazar b'Rebbi Shimon. Remember, Rabbi Elazar b'Rebbi Shimon was the one who said that not only are you not allowed to wear a spiked sandal, but you can't even handle it because it's totally muktzah. So we don't paskin like that. So the Gemara says pshita, shouldn't that be obvious? Yachid b'Rabim halacha kerabim. Whenever you have a machlokas between one versus many, you always go like the many, like the Chachamim. And since the Chachamim say that it's non-muktzah, it should be obvious that it's non-muktzah. The Gemara says, "Ma'ud tema mistavra time with Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon baha kamash malan," that you might have thought that Rabbi Elazar b'Reb Shimon's reasoning is very sound, and therefore maybe we would paskin like him, even though he's only the minority opinion. And because it makes very good sense that if we allow you to wear the sandal, you're going to come to, if we allow you to carry and handle the sandal, you may come to put it on, because that's the normal function of a sandal. So therefore, kamash malan, that we don't paskin like him. Amr Abchia, ilav de karuli bavloi shari isura sharina beituva. So if it were not for the fact that people already accused me of being a makel Babylonian, I would have permitted even more spikes in a shoe on Shabbos than what these other rabbis have permitted. You see, rabbis have to worry about their reputation. If a rabbi's already developed a reputation of being a makel, he has to be careful about being makel on other things. But he says, if it weren't for the fact that my rep, has already been called into question, I would be matir the spike shoe even more than my colleagues. The kama. How much? So he says, "B'pumpadisa amrin esrin va'arba." In Pumpadisa, the rabbis are prepared to be matir 24 spikes, which is a lot of spikes. B'sura amrin esrin v'tartan, and in Surah they say 22 spikes. So Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak v'simonech adasu mipumpadisa l'sura chasr tarti. The way to remember this is that by the time you walk from Pumpadisa to Surah, your spike shoes get so worn out that you lose 2 spikes. And you go down from 24 to 22 by the time you get to Surah. And this is where we'll hold it for today. You have a wonderful day.
Go ahead.